grade 11s, as we get into this first unit on the properties of matter, I want to take a minute to distinguish between whether properties are chemical or physical. We describe matter in terms of many different characteristics. Some of these characteristics have to do with the way it looks or feels or smells, and others with the way it reacts. So before we even go there, we want to know, what is matter? Well, matter is anything that takes up space and has mass. If you could put it in a container, it's matter. So air is matter. A desk is matter. You are matter. Matter exists in three main states. Matter could either be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. When we try to determine whether a substance is a solid or a liquid or a gas, what we're interested in is how closely packed are the particles and how fast they are moving. In the case of a solid, our particles are all touching. They vibrate on fixed points. In the case of a liquid, the particles are still touching, but there's enough space between them to allow them to roll around past each other. In the case of a gas, the spaces between the particles are often bigger than the particles are themselves. Gases move very quickly and bounce around to fill any container that they're put in. When we describe the properties of matter, we describe it in terms of its physical properties or its chemical properties. Physical properties are things that we observe that don't change the substance's chemical composition. We do not need to break bonds and make new ones. Describing matter in terms of its color or its texture, what temperature does it melt or boil at, are all things we can use to describe matter that don't involve breaking bonds and making new ones. These are physical properties. Chemical properties talk about how the substance reacts. Chemical properties are usually described in terms of questions. Does the substance burn? Will it fizz if we put it in water? These would be chemical properties of matter. Go to your textbook and on pages 76 and 77, I want you to find a definition and at least 5 examples for each physical and chemical changes. Physical changes happen when we change things like changing the state. The physical changes happen and the substance is still the same before and after. For example, ice melting is a physical change. You will need to find 4 more examples and a definition. Chemical changes happen when a chemical reaction occurs. New products are formed. For example, when you light a match and the match burns. This is a chemical change. Matches burning create carbon, carbon dioxide, and water. So that would be a chemical change. You will need to find at least 4 more examples. Matter can be further subdivided into being mixtures or pure substances. The biggest difference between a mixture or a pure substance is what it takes in order to separate it. Mixtures can be separated by physical changes. Mixtures might be heterogeneous, where the parts look different, or homogeneous, where the parts look the same throughout. Heterogeneous mixtures could be things like nuts and bolts in a container, or salad dressing, where you can see all the separate components. A homogeneous mixture could be a cup of coffee, where the mixture includes the coffee in the water and you cannot see the separate parts. Either of these mixtures can be separated by using a physical process. Pure substances are things that cannot be separated using physical processes. Pure substances might be elements who cannot be separated down into any smaller component, or compounds. Compounds are mixtures of elements. They have more than one type of element included. Compounds can only be separated by doing a chemical reaction. Using your textbook, define each of the following terms on this page and give an example. Now that we understand the difference between mixtures and pure substances, and whether pure substances are elements or compounds, we're going to take a look at the following pictures and decide what they might be. I will do a couple with you. In the first example, we can see that some of the particles are black and some are white. There are two different kinds of elements there. We also notice that each little grouping is exactly the same, one black with two whites. Because each grouping is the same and there are no different kinds of groupings, this is a compound. It would be B. In the next example, I notice that there are discrete units that are white and some that are black. They are not bonded together. Each white dot is an element. Each black dot is a different element. But they are not bonded together, so they are not a compound. This is a mixture of elements. The third one has compounds, two blacks with four whites, and elements, white, white. I know that this is an element because there's only one type of atom, and that this is a compound because there's two types of atoms. But the element and the compound are not bonded. This is a mixture of both elements and compounds. Try to see if you can figure out the rest of these on your own. Mixtures are separated by physical processes. A good example of separating mixtures by physical processes is distillation. Suppose you have a mixture of liquids together, or a mixture of solids dissolved in liquids. This would be called a solution. And I want to separate it back to its component parts. I can do this by distillation. In the process of distillation, the mixture is heated up until the liquids start to boil. Because each liquid has its own boiling point, at the point that it's boiling, it is turning from a liquid into a gas. That gas will then travel down this tube that is cooled by water coming in and wrapping around the outside and then leaving. So we cool the liquid, and liquid will then condense. When the liquid changed to a gas, that was called evaporation. Now we have condensation. These are both physical processes. When something condenses, it changes from a gas back into a liquid, and so that liquid will drip into this container. The temperature in the thermometer will hold constant during the entire process of that particular liquid. Once that liquid has completely boiled off, the temperature will rise again until it reaches the boiling point of the next liquid in the mixture. Reading in your textbook or Googling, what other processes can be used to separate mixtures? At the end of this lesson, I'm hoping that you're able to define matter as being anything that has mass and takes up space. A good way to decide if something's matter is to decide, if you're not sure, is it energy? There are only two things in the universe, matter and energy. You should also be able to explain how solids, liquids, and gases differ in terms of how close the particles are and how fast they're moving. You should tell the difference between a physical and a chemical property, explain how mixtures differ from pure substances, and how you can tell the difference between a mixture and a pure substance. In our next lecture, we're going to take a closer look at the difference between the different phases of matter